and Scott is feisty. Man, are you in a treat for tonight? Because they tried to steal from Leigh today. And I've never met anyone more feisty than Leigh Dundas. She will fight for you. She will fight for the children. She will fight for this country. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to present Leigh Dundas.
For those of you who don't know, my name is Leigh Dundas. There might be somebody listening online who doesn't know. And my mother gave me extra letters, so that's Leigh, in case you're looking for me on social media. And the last name is, of course, Dundas. And you can find me at leighdundas.com because, as you probably also know by this point, if you're actually speaking truth, you're being banned pretty much everywhere. So I want to start, actually tonight I want to talk about how the Holocaust happened and how the Holocaust stopped happening, because I think we are, I would say, headed toward a second Holocaust, but we might already be in it, and we need to cut it short sooner rather than later. But before I get there, I do want to address some things. I have not been addressing them for a few weeks. We are not part of the Arise tour. So if you are looking to see Robert David Steele, that is the Arise tour. If you're looking to see Patriot Street Fighter Scott McKay, if you are looking to see Sasha Stone, if you are looking to see Renette Sinem or Christiane Northrup, or me, Leigh Dundas, we are the AriseFreedomTour.com. A general rule that I let drama go, particularly in a year like this, because we've all had a heck of a year, and the enemy doesn't really need to work hard if we're splitting ourselves 8 ways to Sunday and bickering amongst ourselves. So I, generally speaking, don't address stuff. Drama happens, drama goes, I let it go. And I think any of you who know me from the vaccine fight in 2019 know what I'm talking about. Lots of different groups. Everybody has a different idea about how to get there. They all think they have the best ideas. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. You know, different strokes for different folks. I'm not here to tell you that their way is the best way or not the best way. That's for you guys to decide. And so generally speaking, I just float along and rise above that stuff and let it go. But there comes a point in time where if doing that is allowing falsehoods to stand, or allowing people to labor under misapprehensions, that needs to be corrected. So when I was invited on Robert David Steele's tour, I was promised football stadiums every day for 110 days, full of 10,000 people. And to me, that is a significant ability to cause a shift in America if that is delivered. Right. Significant enough that I would leave my husband and child behind for almost 4 months, because I believe if I can reach that many people that we can and will make a difference. And that was the exchange upon which I agreed to say yes. And upon that yes, and upon the yes of Sasha Stone, and upon the yes of Scott McKay, money was raised from good Americans in $100, $110, $108 increments to deliver all of us to America. So there were some things that went on that didn't have that occurring. And, you know, I don't mind playing to a group of 28 farmers. I happen to think farmers are the salt of the earth. I grew up milking goats, I can kill my own chickens. My parents had an auto body shop. I was born blue collar and I'm gonna die blue collar. I got nothing on it. You guys, me, this is what it's about. I wasn't born with a silver spoon, probably never gonna find one. And I am okay with that, because this is what it's about, not this, right? But when good people give you money and they expect you to deliver on a promise and you don't, and you've involved my name on it, that's a problem. I need you to deliver, because we have had the worst year probably in history. and people are hanging on by a thread. I am talking about meeting people in Milton, Florida, young guy, and he said, ma'am, when you said it was a Holocaust, you weren't kidding. Pfizer killed my grandpa. He died 3 days after the first shot, and both my parents are on their deathbed after the Moderna shot. I'm going to lose everybody. This is exactly like the Holocaust. And then he burst into tears, and he was ugly crying for multiple minutes. Wow. I held on to this young kid, and his tears were running down my collarbone. And I finally, we thought we were together, and we separated. And I looked at him and I said, we can't undo what they did, but you can help fix it by never stopping telling your story, not ever. And then he doesn't cry all over again. These are the people who paid good money to see us give them hope. These are the people I need to reach. And if you are going to not allow me to do that, there's a problem with that. And worse, if you are going to take good money and not deliver us to them so that they never get a chance to see us when we're in their state, there's a problem with that. Amen. So I'm going to leave you with this. If you are looking to see us, we are the Arise Freedom Tour. If you are looking to see Robert David Steele and a Nebraska farmer, you should Google him. You should Google him by the name of Trent Luce, who are taking 5 buses that used to be wrapped with all of our images around the country on those dimes. Then you go to their tour. If you are going to pay $10,000 or $1,000 to see him at the base of Mount Rushmore, because, quote, his ground commander, Trent Luce, owns the park at the base of Mount Rushmore, and Donald Trump has said he's coming, which I have heard him say multiple times, I highly recommend to you that you confirm that before you pay him. And I'll just leave it there. On a perhaps unrelated note, y'all know I fight child sex trafficking in Southeast Asia, right? Against multiple Asian mafias. I work in towns that have 140 child brothels in them and nothing else. I work in towns where 7-year-olds are serially raped for profit every night, 7, 8, 9 times, 7, 8, 9, and 10 times a night. And nobody ever comes for them except maybe us if we get there in time, if we get there often enough. I have never had my car jacked. I had my car broken into 3 hours before I got here today. All of my electronics were taken. All of our laptops were taken. I don't give a darn about that. That can be bought again at Best Buy. It is rather interesting on the timing. But I will tell you what I will not forgive. Whoever did it, and I'm not saying who did it. I don't know who did it. My assistant, who is way below her pay grade, she is a registered nurse working for free because she believes in freedom, had her mother's pearl necklace stolen out of her backpack. Yeah. And you know what? Such is our desire to deliver what others promised, that we are rolling through the country. I'm racking $2 grand, $3 grand a day on my credit card, so are the boys. And we are delivering what other people promised, because I will not deliver on a promise no matter who made it. And I don't care what So I'm going to ask you for something I never ask for, because I don't like to ask for help, and you people who know me know that. I'm going to ask you for your prayers. I'm going to ask you for anything you give me that you think protects me, like the nice lady who gave me this nice bracelet. And at the end of this, I'm going to ask you for your donations. Not because we're going to use them. We're not going to use them. We're going to use them to deliver to you what America needs right now.
Come on.
Tampa, where, thank you very much, Clay Clark promised me 10,000 people in a church, and he delivered on it. I had a pastor who stole jets for the Colombian cartel and spent 20 years in federal prison in Leavenworth. And is the most amazing guy I think I may have ever met. Give me his book, which was also stolen halfway through it, man, and it was so good. It's called something like Jet Ride to Hell, Journey to Freedom. You got to read it. And he looked at me and he laid hands on me and he prayed over me and all of us. And I got done and he goes, God just gave me a word for you. You need to learn to accept help. Not in your own name, because I don't think you like to accept help in your own name. You need to learn to accept help because you are helping other people, and it's the natural flow of things for them to want to help you back. And you're doing them a disservice when you don't let them. And you're doing yourselves a disservice because if you don't accept the help that you really need right now, you're not going to be able to continue to deliver to them the help that they need. Majored in the minors for the last 7 minutes. I never talk about this stuff. I'm going to wrap it up. You can find us at arisefreedomtour.com. Tomorrow we are going to be headed to Reno, through Reno. We are going to be in Salt Lake City at the Corner Restaurant in a little town outside Salt Lake on Monday night at 6 p.m. called Corner Restaurant. I think it's at Midway, if I'm not incorrect on that, Utah. From there on Tuesday night, we are going to be in Boise, Idaho at a church that I think is called Valley Life Church in Caldwell, also at 6 p.m. And then we're going to go up to Coeur d'Alene on Wednesday. And we're going to be up there at the Silver Lake Mall at 6 o'clock. And then we're going to have about a week and a half break. And on the 4th, did you tell them what we're doing on the 4th of July? Okay, so on the 4th of July, we are going to be in Sturgis at the Buffalo Chip Ranch. And I will actually be where I say I'm going to be. And I would love for you guys to join us out there. All right. Now I'm going to talk to you about a man by the name of Stanley Milgram. In 1961, Stanley Milgram, who was a professor at Yale University, decided he was going to try to figure out if the Holocaust was the result of a unique set of factors that would never recur in society, such that we didn't need to worry about a second one happening, or if there was something inside of us that could potentially cause it to recur. So he devised this little study on obedience to authority. And he had normal people, like the ones sitting in front of me, come in from society. Farmers and mechanics and bankers and lawyers and housewives and students. And he made a little memory experiment. And he paired them up. So she and I would get paired up in a memory experiment. We would memorize arbitrary pairs of words. So when I said purple, she's supposed to know to say zebra. And then we were separated and put into 2 different rooms. And when I said purple, and she said zebra, everything went swimmingly. But when I said purple and she gave me a wrong answer, this is where it got exciting. I was supposed to shock her with a little switch on a switchboard in front of me with some voltage of electricity that would cause it to be transmitted into the other room where she had been wired up with electrodes and she got a little zap. And it started off with a very nominal amount of electricity, like, I don't know, 9 volts or something. Not fun. We've all licked a battery. At least I have. Am I the only curious kid? Ow! Ow! Wow, that tickles. Ow! My poor mom. I never stopped talking and I did things like licking 9 volts. I mean, poor thing. And no wonder she stopped after 1, right? But anyway, so, it starts off with a nominal amount of voltage. I flip a switch and she's unhappy, but she's not dying. But for every wrong answer, I am supposed to flip a successively higher switch that has a successively higher amount of voltage attached to it. And it goes all the way up to 450 volts, which is fatal. And unbeknownst to me, nobody's actually getting shocked in the other room. I am hearing pre-recorded correct and incorrect answers. And I am also hearing pre-recorded sounds of pain, which start out as, ugh, on the lower voltages, to, ah, this is starting to kill me, man. I had a heart surgery last year. If you keep this up, I'm going to die. And this would cause no small amount of cognitive upset and dissonance on the part of me, the person shocking the person in the other room, who would eventually, if they weren't Ted Bundy, turn to the researcher and say, hey, dude, I don't know how happy I am continuing to shock my neighbor over a wrong answer that she gave me. And the researcher was a doctor, a man in a position of authority in a white lab coat, probably about as long as I'm wearing, right? And he wasn't supposed to hold a gun to her head to get her to continue the experiment. He wasn't supposed to lock the door and not let her out of the room. He wasn't supposed to threaten her family. He was charged with saying 3 little words: you must continue. And the question is, what percentage of Americans would continue to shock their neighbor all the way to 450 volts simply because a doctor in a white lab coat told them they had to do so? And when Stanley Milgram started shopping his little idea around the psychology department at Yale in 1961, all of his fellow colleagues were like, Stanley, you've been smoking the good stuff. You're high. Nobody's going to kill their neighbor over a wrong answer because some dude in a white lab coat said they had to do so. Y'all remember how many of us were willing to kill our neighbor over a wrong answer on a memory quiz? 2 out of 3. 65-point-something%. And they did this study over and over and over and over again with the exact same results in multiple different cities and states in multiple different countries. 2 out of 3 people will murder their neighbor, notwithstanding the fact that they are good, normal, law-abiding Christians who don't have so much as a traffic ticket on their record, just because somebody said they had to. That is how hardwired to be obedient we are. Holocaust wasn't the result of Hitler, my friends. The Holocaust was the result of people who were being overly obedient, who had been brainwashed, and who were not standing up to the one man who was here. And our job I want everybody to swallow your head right now. I want you to look all around this room. Look. Go ahead. Picture 2/3 of us killing everybody else in here. Because that is what the statistics said over and over again, even in good church-going crowds. So I want you to think about that. Every time Fauci opens his mouth, every time Newsom opens his mouth, every time Cuomo opens his mouth, every time the Attorney General in Michigan says, oh, there's a woman who's going to go on Tucker Carlson, and she's planning on talking about the lockdown in not very favorable terms. So she texts, this is the highest law enforcement officer in that state. And this person says, do we know this woman's whereabouts? Because if we do, we should have her picked up before she goes on national TV. And then they did. They picked her up for a thought crime. First of all, it's not a crime to use your First Amendment rights. Second of all, it is certainly not a crime to think about exercising your First Amendment rights. Every second of this year, I want you to be thinking about Stanley Milgram. We can't afford not to. We simply can't afford not to. Stanford prison riots. Anybody ever heard about that one? A couple people. So in Stanford, I think it was about 10 years later, another psychology professor was like, hey, I'm going to take Stanford students and divide them in half. We're going to flip a coin, totally arbitrary. Half of them are going to become prisoners, half of them are going to become guards. So it's a totally arbitrary distinction. The day before, they were all just students in a class. Now half of them are prisoners, half of them are guards. On day 1, the prisoners revolted. They blockaded their doors with some of the furniture. And do you know what the guards did to subdue and quell the uprising? They used fire extinguishers. 35 hours into the experiment, one of the prisoners was so crazy, they had to remove him. The guards were turning into sadists. And the experiment only ended up going 6 days. They had to cancel the experiment after 6 days. The guards were making them urinate and defecate in a bucket and not let them take it outside. They were making them walk around naked. They weren't feeding them. They were taking their mattresses away and making them sleep on cold concrete floors. And these were people that were students of theirs, friends of theirs 3 days earlier. Wow. That is how sadistic they became. When the study was prematurely terminated for obvious reasons, the guards were upset. Yeah. So this again speaks to a number of things. 1, we are hardwired to be obedient, and 2, it's not always a good thing, and 3, it is not always a result of just your personality or just your environment. But when you have a personality that is hardwired to be obedient because it saved our lives when we were running from a woolly mammoth and our leader said, run away from the woolly mammoth before he bites you in the buns. But now, Newsom is saying, keep your children out of school, don't breathe enough oxygen, and keep your businesses locked down for another year, that is not a pro-survival tip. And we need to start rising up against it, because 15 months of this stuff is way too long. Social distancing is actually social isolation, and it was a POW technique. I must have talked about it up here before. I'm going to talk about it one more time. In the early 1950s, at a Montreal Ritz-Carlton, in a secret room, the British military intelligence doctors and the American counterparts and the Canadian counterparts had a little meeting, and the sole purpose of that was to figure out what the single most effective way was of breaking down another human being. And they commissioned studies. They gave one of the researchers $30,000, which was a fortune in 1951. And if you fast forward to the end of these studies, what they found is that the ideal way, I'm quoting, the ideal way of breaking another human being down, it's not food deprivation, it's not sleep deprivation, and it is not physical torture. It is social isolation. It is social distancing. That's a euphemism for social isolation. For those of you who don't know what it does medically, it creates accelerated cognitive decline. It creates memory problems. It creates anxiety. It creates suicidal thoughts. It creates depression. It creates poor immunity. It creates all sorts of things like the things you see in Alzheimer's patients, even though the person is not Alzheimer patient aged. It is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day and being an alcoholic, not or being an alcoholic, and being an alcoholic. And it destroys the part of your brain known as the ventral striatum, which is responsible for feelings of love, and it is also responsible for how you learn. Okay? This is a problem. When Senator John McCain, I don't care what you think about him now, that man spent years isolated in POW camps, more years isolated than not. And when he came back from the Vietnamese POW camps, he said, and I quote, "It is an awful thing. It crushes your spirit more effectively than any other form of mistreatment." And then 150 downed naval aviators came back on the heels of John McCain from the POW camps in Vietnam and said the same darn thing, that it was, quote, as torturous and as agonizing as any other physical abuse they endured, such that now the UN rules, the Mandela rules of the UN, prohibit more than 2 weeks, more than 15 days of social distancing or social isolation, because they call it cruel and inhumane punishment on par with a war crime. Right? We are doing to our children things that POWs in Vietnam could not withstand. There is a reason a little kid who was 11 years old in Central California blew his brains out on Zoom school in front of the whole darn class a few weeks before Christmas last year. So I want you to promise me this, because this is not harmless. We keep going, oh, it's no big deal. No, it's not no big deal. If you would put a mask on your dog and then put him in a little plexiglass cube and never allowed him to touch anybody, the ASPCA would have arrested you 2 years ago for treating your dog that way. And now we are treating our children that way. We are treating our children in ways that the UN has prohibited. We are treating our children in ways that the military is not allowed to treat prisoners of war, and it is killing them. And I want you to promise me this. If in September we're going back to school, who the heck knows, in California will do some, and they are social distancing your child, you take them out. Yeah. You take them out. Really quickly, I know you all know they're horrible, but did you guys see the new study that came out of Florida like 3 days ago on June 15th? A couple people in the front row. Okay, I'm going to tell you the rest of it. So they put these little kids in clean masks, brand new clean masks, and they sent them to school for 8 hours, just one day. Just one day. And then they sent the little masks to the little lab to see what little critters might be growing on them. And you know what they found?
Everywhere.
Strep, staph, E. coli, pneumococcal stuff, meningitis, mold, fungal stuff, all sorts of creepy crawlies. And that was after 8 hours on a clean mask. You know what they did not find? not one speck of virus. Because the virus is yay big, and the holes on the mask are yay big, and so the virus just swims on through like a mosquito going through a chain link fence. But the bacteria gets trapped, and anybody who ever had like 7th grade science knows that's going to turn into a petri dish, especially in Florida where it's hot and moist and humid all the time. So I'm going to make it really simple because I'm a lawyer and I suck at math and science. That's why I went to law school. If you don't let your 5-year-old lick the urinal at LAX airport, you shouldn't put him in a mask. Better off letting them lick the urinal. It might have less bacteria. That's the next thing they need to do. So, who knows Savannah Leigh's name, the little girl playing basketball in Oregon? Savannah Leigh is 16 years old. Savannah Leigh's mother called me about a month ago. Savannah Leigh is on the basketball team up in Crook County, Oregon, and her mama told her, you need to take the mask off. And you should do it in a group because there's power in groups. All the little girls on your team and in cheer should take the mask off. And the very next day she got a call from the school and she was so excited. This mother, when she told me the story, was so excited. She thought the school was calling to tell her her daughter had been disobedient and she was about to have a proud mommy moment. The school was calling to tell her that the child had stayed in the mask and had played basketball in the heat and the humidity, cardio, full cardio, running up and down the court, and halfway through practice went up to the coach and said, Coach, I can't breathe. I can't get a deep breath. Can I take the mask off? And the coach, to his discredit, said, no, you may not. And then he relented and he said, well, if you really feel the need to take the mask off, go ahead on into the locker room and you can take it off for 60 seconds. So little Savannah Leigh walks over to the locker room, can't breathe, and that's about all the farther she gets, and she passes out cold on the floor, and she's unconscious for 2 minutes. Actually, she's without oxygen or a heartbeat for 2 minutes. Where her teammate comes out of the bathroom stall, finds her on the floor, lifts little Savannah Leigh up to see if she's fogging the mirror, and she wasn't. The girl had no pulse, no heart rate, no respiration. I'll do the math for you again. She was clinically dead. So now every damn coach in a 1-mile radius who was too dumb and too inconsiderate and too self-whatever that he had to go virtue signaling to the Nazi Kate Brown governor is on his knees on the damn floor doing 7 solid minutes of CPR to no avail. They could not get a heartbeat back. And then a passing first responder, a policeman in a cop car, had a Narcan unit, which is what they use on heroin overdoses, and she hadn't done any drugs, but they decided to try that, and it revived her a little bit, and then they lost her again in the back of the ambulance with the EMTs on the way to the hospital, where, with a little grace from God and a whole lot of work by the doctors, they finally got her back. They finally got her back. They finally got her back. So this is the other thing I want to say about mask wearing. This is not a fiction. This is not something you do for your neighbor. This is not something you do to make other people safe. It doesn't work. You guys know about the observer effect? Where you watch an experiment and simply the act of watching, the quantum physics experiment, which I don't understand, simply the act of watching it changes the experiment. So what we know is the act of watching something and putting your attention on something changes it. What we also know is that if you put your attention on it and you hope for a good result, it will actually change it for the better. Have you heard the study where they divided a class of kids in half right down the middle? What they told the teachers, these guys were smart, those guys weren't. It was totally arbitrary. They were like equally smart and dumb on both sides of the room. And at the end of the year, and they videotaped the teacher. She was doing a good job. She wasn't like, hey, Smarties, come on up and solve the problem. Oh, you're an idiot. You're probably not going to be able to do it, but come on up, buddy. She was very even-handed. There was nothing overt that would have given away that she was treating the smart ones like smart ones and the dumb ones like dumb ones. Nothing distinguishable in her verbal and nonverbal interactions between the two groups. Guess what happened at the end of the year? The ones that she had been told were smarter were performing way better. And the ones that she had been told were not smart were performing, sadly, way worse. Unspoken expectation, nothing she did in the physical universe, and still it changed the outcome. So what we know is that hope works. Put putting our attention on something changes it. And putting our attention on something in a positive way, with a positive expectation, a hopeful expectation, really, 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 really changes it. And that is how come the answer to the question of what was responsible for the Holocaust is you and me. And it's the same answer for what stopped the Holocaust. Tyranny never wins. Eventually, goodness wins. Eventually, righteousness wins. Eventually, innocence wins. Eventually, God wins. And as we walk into Father's Day weekend, I want you to think about the men who are the fathers of this country. And by that, I mean the forefathers of this country, who in a couple of weeks we're going to be celebrating July 4th, who gave birth to this country because they were so against tyranny that they created a country based on freedom that had never been seen before on this planet. I want you to think as well about the men like my grandfather, who had children and who went to war and who fought. And some of them, like my grandfather, came home. And I also want you to think about the little boys who were 17 years old and lied about their age so they could join up and walked onto the beach in Normandy into a hail of bullets and never came back. And I want you to think as well, because this is the era we're living in, World War II was a little bit further away, about all the men, fathers and the ones who didn't get to be fathers, who came into the La Drang, Vietnam, to Da Nang, Vietnam, to some hellhole in Vietnam, some jungle in